Let's get corrupted. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Joe with Meteoric Serpents coming back at you for another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. Guys, it's great to be back post Daytona. And I'm sure my guests and I are going to discuss Daytona a little bit, but I had a great time just to kind of break it down a little bit. Sorry, guys. I don't know if the StreamYard's being laggy. It's a little laggy on my end. So I hope you saw all that. Got some new graphics. I'm excited about that. I designed it myself this time. So I'm a little proud of that because I'm no graphic designer by any means. But hope you like that new little intro bit. Um but yeah, Daytona was super fun. I did pick up a few snakes. Maybe I'll talk about it a little bit because all of them came from our guest. But yeah, so super exciting. It was a great show. It was great to meet everyone who's in the live chats. I saw some people, some familiar faces. So it was a great show. But yeah, so let's see here. Guys, if this is your first time here or if you're returning, make sure you do hit the like and subscribe on today's podcast. Uh, helps out the algorithm, pushes it out to more people. I just want to bring more Colubrid content to you guys. All my social media, that's basically where I'm at. I'm everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Morph Market, and Patreon, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's basically at Meteoric Serpents on everything. Let's see here. And we are on all of the podcasting platforms. So like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, so you can listen to this in the car and whatever. If you are listening to this on one of those audio platforms, I'd appreciate it if one, you could, rate and review it. So give it that 5 stars if you enjoy listening. Drop a nice review. That always helps out. Pushes the algorithm there. And then come to YouTube. Even if you're not going to watch the video version, just drop a like on this, drop a comment, do something. Again, it helps push out the algorithm to more people, and I always appreciate that. And I can't thank you guys enough for all the support I've gotten, over the last little bit. It's been awesome to see us grow. And we are at 950 subscribers. So again, getting closer and closer to that end goal. It's not really an end goal, but getting closer to that 1,000 milestone. So super exciting. Also, guys, make sure you support USARK Florida. Those are the organizations that fight to keep our rights, to keep our reptiles, whether they are pets, whether it's your business, all of that stuff. We want to, keep our right to keep these animals. I have a ton of animals and I wouldn't want them being taken away. So make sure you go do that. Also, guys, I've been talking about it every week, but in just a month, Colubrid Fest is happening at the Indiana Convention Center, thrown by the guys at CCR, Zach and Clint, and the Show Me Reptiles show. It's going to be a 3-day event, all Colubrid affair. I will be there. I will be giving a talk on the Saturday. Going to be super exciting. Pretty stoked for it, and to meet a ton of you guys, a ton of other Colubrid fanatics, and just people I've talked to over the internet in person for the first time, which I got to do at Daytona, which was awesome, by the way. So thank you all so much for being welcoming and nice people in person. It was great. Also, guys, I had mentioned, so the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. So I definitely wanted to highlight that this week because I would say, not that I was slacking, but I made some changes to the membership tiers to really give more to the people. I really want to build a super strong community of like-minded people. People who are newer in the hobby. It could give you a place to be, a community. Again, that's what I want it to be, where you could ask questions, share your animals, do all that stuff. There's a lot of benefits to it. And I'm going to be doing a lot of exclusive content from here on out, showing off what's going on in my collection, just showing things. So yeah, it's going to be really exciting. And if you just want to say thanks or support this podcast a little bit more, you can feel free to join that Patreon. And plus, you'll be added to the Discord with a nice group of people. And we kind of just shoot the shit and talk about animals and all that stuff. So super fun. Last but not least, before we bring our guest on, we do have hashtag Colubrid Corruption of the week. And I got to share one of my buddies. He had a great Daytona pickup. Why is it so laggy today? I'm sorry, guys. Hopefully this kind of fixes itself. Let's see. Oh no, I'm frozen. Okay. Here it is. Yellowtail Crebo by my boy Veterinary Arts. This is a stellar example. Just super cool contrast with all the colors. You guys can see my cursor. I really love that kind of black and white and grayscale there. And of course, you have the yellow head leading down into the yellow tail, obviously where it got its name. It's just a super cool snake, and I'm super happy for my dog Brock to get a species he's been talking about for a while. I know I helped in the corruption department. So yeah, that's why this is hashtag Colubrid corruption of the week. I did see some great animals on there though. Thank you guys so much for keeping up that posting. Hopefully I could get to a bunch of you in the coming weeks, but yeah, so super fun. Oh shoot, I'm lagging again. I hope it's not too bad on your guys' end. All right. And before we get started, before we bring our guests out, just going to say what's up to some of the people in the chat and thank them for being here. We have JNS Exotics, James Perry. What's up? Thanks for being here. Eric's More Factory. Thanks for being here, my dog. He's been moving his stuff for the last few days, so I hope you're doing good, Eric. Yes, Krista is a vet also, so she wanted to tune in. That's what's up. Thanks for being here. We have Eric from PJ's Creations. Thanks for being here. We have Quirky Snakes. Hope he's bringing calzones for all of us. I'm not sure if he meant me because I'm Italian. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah. We got Adam, one of our Patreon members here. What's up, man? Thanks for hanging out. We got JC. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm lagging up a storm right now. I hope this kind of... Oh, maybe that's why. Should probably close out those programs. Hopefully that fixes itself. What's up, JC? I got your snake coming to you soon next week. I'm delivering that. Reptiles and Oddities, appreciate you being here. Morph Valley Reptiles, man, Freddie, what's up? Genomic Labs, thanks for being here. Jason Keller, what's up? 5 Snakes at Daytona. I am also in that same boat, so being hush-hush about it because the collection's getting big. We also have Constrictly Business. Appreciate it. And that's going to do it for tonight, guys. But in case you didn't see the thumbnail, we have on the other half of Palm Beach Colubrids. Really excited. And one day we'll probably have both of them on. Definitely need to do that to kind of get that camaraderie together. But we have on Mike Gillen of Palm Beach Colubrids. So let us welcome Mike. What's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Joe? How are you?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
Doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Just got done feeding, a couple hundred hatchlings, so it was a good afternoon.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, we were just talking about it. I'm sure it was a busy week, settling back in from Daytona. You were vending, obviously, with John. Had a ton of animals there. It was really good to see you guys. And like I mentioned, 4 out of 5 of my pickups came from you two. So I helped lighten that load a little bit.
Yep. Just a little, greatly appreciated.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, man. So I had John on, obviously. It was a few months back now, talking about kind of his half of your guys' collection. But you have a lot of really cool animals in there too, and a species that I haven't really brought on and talked a whole lot about, which is cow kings. But before we kind of get in and deep dive into your collection, I want to hear, how'd you get started with reptiles and how that kind of brought you to where you are today with them?
All right. Well, I think, that's a question I get asked a lot. I think just from, from work, a lot of clients want to know, it's like the fun question they ask the vet, like, oh, what made you
Yeah.
want to be a vet? Why do you like snakes? Um, so I think for me, I moved down to Florida before I can even remember. I was born up in New York. My parents moved down here, and I just remember when I was little, my dad would go and he'd catch a corn snake and he'd put it in a tank and, set it up and, kind of show me, teach me about it. I'd feed it
Yeah.
some lizards, let it go, And so it was just always that kind of in-home education, I guess, so far as
Right.
teaching me about the wildlife and to respect the wildlife and know, we lived on a little canal at the time. It was like, hey, know the difference between a cottonmouth and a banded water snake, and things like that. And it just kind of grew into something. Sorry if you can hear my dog drinking.
No, it's
He's
all
about,
good. No
but
worries.
it just kind of grew into a love. And I got my first Cal King when I was 12.
Okay.
And I've had them ever since. So it just, they
Nice.
stuck with me. But I think that's kind of really what got me started on them.
Hell yeah. And then you obviously mentioned, so we were going to talk about it a little bit. So you are a vet, practicing veterinarian, which is super cool. So obviously the passion for animals in general has been strong forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funny story about me. And I don't know if you knew this, but I'm actually from New York too. So that's funny. Whereabouts were you guys from?
I was born in Albany, but I mean, we moved
Oh,
when I was
okay,
like
okay.
a year old. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
uh,
Yeah, I'm from Queens, but I wanted to be a vet, and I started college as a bio major. And then I took organic chemistry my sophomore year, and organic chem and genetics, which again, I always say people think genetics, oh, snakes, like that should be easy, but that's not what genetics is. Genetics in college is DNA biology, if you could put another name to it. But yeah, those two classes destroyed me, and then I switched to finance, and I'm a lot better with numbers than I am with science.
fair enough. Biochem will get a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, no. So I mean, I wanted to be a vet from my love of animals, and you are now. If you want to kind of talk about getting into your career a little bit, because I'm sure a lot of the snake keeping and all that stuff. What made you kind of set on that path?
So, I kind of the stereotypical, yeah, I mean, I always loved animals growing up. I think, when I started to realize that that was an actual thing, it wasn't just like a make believe Dr. Doolittle that talks to them, and, I could actually help and I could, really treat my own animals too. That was a huge thing for me because,
Right.
as a kid, you're 15, 16 years old, one of your snakes is sick. It's like, okay, good luck. Not a lot of vets like to see reptiles, and
Yeah.
not a lot of vets have a lot of experience with reptiles either. So, and it's
Right.
nothing, that's, I'm not saying that in a negative way. You have to have that special interest, and you have to, really pursue that education to get the experience.
Yeah.
So, it was even in South Florida, you'd kind of assume it's really easy to find vets that have a ton of reptile experience, and it's not as easy as you would think.
Yeah.
But
Gotcha.
yeah, I mean, that was definitely a huge motivating factor for sure.
Okay. Yeah. And we talked about it before the show. So you're not actually a board certified exotics vet. You do deal with the dogs and cats, mostly your standard stuff. Um but what was there some stuff you learned along the way that has helped you with your reptile keeping per se, or has there been anything that you've had to, I don't want to say like do to any of your animals, but like anything in terms of like diseases that you were able to catch and stuff like that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and a lot of it really, yes, for sure, you do kind of learn on the job in a sense, because you're going to see things that, I did like a 6 weeks externship at University of Georgia under their Zoom Ed program, and that's a phenomenal program.
Okay.
Both of their Zoom Ed specialists, Dr. Divers and Dr. Mayer, are phenomenal. Um, so, but 6 weeks you can only learn so much, and that was many
Right.
years ago. I mean, I do a lot of continuing education, and when I can, I try to focus in on reptiles in particular, but all exotic medicine. I see a lot of pocket pets, rabbits, guinea pigs, things like that. Mainly though, yeah, I see dogs and cats. I have lots of friends, in the reptile industry. So, sometimes they bring me fun surprises, and, big, big iguanas, big tortoises.
Okay.
Every once in a while, somebody carts in an aldabra or something like that.
Okay.
So, I try to keep it exciting. A friend of mine passed away a couple years ago, Fred Grunwald. I don't know if you ever heard of him or not, but he was a legend in the reptile world. He
Okay.
had gators and crocs and caimans and retic berms, just a little bit of everything. And he was just the
Yeah.
nicest guy. And we always joked, it was like, you kind of got nervous if he called, like, what's he going to bring in? Like one time it's a retic, the next time it's a little caiman. It's like, okay, it's
Yeah.
kind of keeps it exciting though.
Yeah. No, and I have to say, and I don't want people um flooding Mike's inbox with vet questions, because that's definitely not the right thing to do. But I can say it was great knowing you when I had that problem with that snake that passed, and I was just like, I kind of freaked out because I didn't know if I was dealing with something severe, but you did kind of calm my nerves, and obviously nothing else has happened in my collection. So I have to say I do appreciate that very much.
For sure.
Yeah. Um Cool. So let's kind of get into the Cow Kings, because I want to talk about them. I could say, so from my background with Cow Kings, I always say I worked at that pet store back in New York for many years, and in New York City you could only have Colubrid, so it was always a diverse selection of I'll call them the industry staples. A lot of corns, rat snakes, kings, and milk snakes was the gist of everything. But there's quite a bit of Cow Kings. And we bred them pretty often, and that was always fun. And I used to have a big hand when it came to breeding stuff, and I just always love seeing the variability come out of the clutches. I don't think we were really dealing with any morphs. Like, we would just get the nice, like, funky pattern, like the aberrants and stuff like that. But I always enjoyed them. It was always fun raising the babies. I actually kept one for a few years personally. But I eventually moved it to make room for another Texas rat at the time. But yeah, that's kind of my background. I got to breed a few clutches of that. And at Daytona, I did pick up a nice pair from you, a nice 50-50, black and white Cow Kings. Super nice, doing super well. But yeah, I want to really talk about what's going on in your collection. So, from what you just said, you just got done feeding a couple hundred hatchlings. First off, what's that collection size looking like?
Oh, I don't even have an exact count, because it's like you try and count them, and then you turn around, either you sell some, or another clutch
Yeah,
hatches, and it's like, I don't know how many I have anymore. It's
yeah,
like you feel like it's a disease. It's like, I don't know.
yeah.
I'm probably, all my hatchlings though, I'm probably at um probably about 300 right now.
Okay,
So
nice,
total, yeah. So it's a
nice.
pretty good size.
Yeah, and obviously, when it comes to snakes that are easy to get started, Cow Kings are kind of, I would say they're almost second to none.
Usually so, yes, thankfully.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've got a good feeding response. They kind of live up to the name king snake for sure.
yeah, definitely. So I do want to start off because when I'm really diving deep into species, I want everything. So what's your general like husbandry like for anyone who's looking to maybe get into some colubrids and that cow king's the first thing on their radar? How do you keep your animals? What do you recommend and all that?
So, right now I keep most of mine in a rack system, which I know there are a lot of critics of rack systems. Cow kings are terrestrial species, so they're not one that you're commonly going to find up in the bushes or up in a tree. Certainly,
Yep.
they do like to stay on the ground. So, most of the guys I talk to out, in their native habitat, they're only really finding them, either road cruising, crossing the road at night, or flipping wood on the ground.
Right.
So so I personally don't think there's anything wrong keeping them in a rack system.
Yep.
In South Florida, I'm kind of spoiled, because obviously our temperatures don't really get extreme, other than, well, we get extreme heat, but but we certainly
Yeah.
don't get too cold down here. Um,
Yeah.
so really all mine's pretty much ambient temperature. The hot, I don't really let it get above, 84, 85. So kind of mid 80s is when I would say, okay, I'm gonna kick the AC on a little bit.
Got it.
But I will let them get down into the high 70s at night. Sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes I even let it dip a little lower than that at night. Um, but I mean, setup wise, it's pretty basic. It's just the rack system with the cup on one end for the water, and just a plastic hide on the other end.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't even run, other than winter months. I don't even run my thermal tape or anything, or any of the heat source at all.
Got it. Yeah. Um, cool. Yeah, and I've always remembered, Cal Kings are super easy to keep. They're definitely one of the easier, more tolerant species. I definitely agree that maybe don't let them get too cold, but like,
Yeah.
like you probably can with some other North American rat snakes at least, but yeah, definitely hovering that like 80 range. That's why I love being able to keep ambient down here because I have
Yeah.
all my racks are here in my garage and I keep so many things ambient, pretty much all the colubrids. And yeah.
Yeah, it's convenient for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Now I want to, if we can deep dive into some of the morphs. And you're gonna have to help me here because I definitely don't know all of them off the top of my head.
Sure.
Cow kings are one of those species like we were saying before. There's actually quite a bit out there. I wouldn't put them on the level of, and maybe I'm misspeaking by saying this. I wouldn't put them on like the corn snake hognose level per se, but
No, no.
there's quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely not, as crazy as the corn snakes for sure. I mean, I joked with my friend Roy and Caitlin. They're with Captivating Reptiles, and I
Yeah.
joke with them all the time. I'm like, I can't keep up, man. I don't know, like all these different names for the corn snakes, and this one has 3 visual genes, this one has 2. I'm like, they all confuse me. Um, so Cal Kings, it's definitely a lot more straightforward. Really, you've only got, so far as genes go, essentially, other than mosaics, you've only got simple recessive genes. So
Yeah.
it's much easier to kind of keep track of in that sense. In my opinion, the only time it gets a little bit messy is with some of the lavender snow lines.
Right.
Because then all of a sudden you're mixing T positive and T negative albino strains in the same animals, and then it just kind of gets messy. You don't really know what you have. I think a lot of people like to say that you know that they know exactly what's in it, but I really sometimes I wonder if they actually know what's in it. Just because
Yeah.
and nothing against them, just from breeding, my own animals that, I have proven out a couple generations, and then I'll mix in like a new bloodline from a different breeder. And
Yep.
sometimes I do not produce what I expect to.
Okay.
So, it's one of those things where it's almost like, hey, there are some surprises out there. And, I mean, it's not just T negative albino that you find popping up. So,
Right.
but yeah,
Gotcha.
I mean, there are a whole bunch of different morphs. I mean, just from like just like a Palomar ghost, like Mendota ghost, like more of the wild found more, or wild
Yep.
caught morphs originally. And several lines of hypermelanism. And then you start mixing that in with T negative albino, and you get blizzards. So blizzards are double visuals.
Right.
There are a ton of different ghost combinations. So all of the Casper ghosts and the pink pearl, and that can get a little bit overwhelming with all the names and everything. But
Okay.
it's just trying to remember which visuals you're talking about. Is that a sapphire? Okay, it's blue-eyed blonde ghost and not lavender
Right.
ghost, or so some of those things, it takes a little getting used to. You gotta like make a little chart up and memorize
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
um but yeah, it definitely, once you start mixing some of those things in together, I think it gets a little bit more interesting, the way the phenotype is, the way the animal actually looks. Because like if you've heard about the ghost gene, right? A lot of people say you can kind of tell when a het ghost, is present by the look of it. They have certain
Okay.
characteristics that makes them look het for ghost. Um, I mean, and I definitely agree with that, but I've got plenty of animals that I've produced that I know are het ghosts that you definitely cannot tell by looking at. So
Got it.
it's like one of those things where if you're not sure about the clutch and you want to hold something back because you think it might be, sure, go for the ones that have those,
Right.
the different face, and kind of that almost washed out, like almost ghost type look. But otherwise, it's just hit or miss.
Yeah. Kevin said you have the sickest kings at Daytona.
Oh, well, I appreciate it, Kevin. I don't know. I think people liked your hogs more than my kings, though.
No, you all had really good stuff. Cool. So let's go back to like even the simplistic. So your standard like wild type king snake is just your general black and white banded animal, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what most people kind of go to so far as what they envision when you say California king snake. Either they are
Right.
in their mind thinking, yeah, it's a black and white banded snake, or some people, they've seen more of the striped, pattern, like a scissors
Okay.
crossing or something, or like a
Okay.
Newport, something like that. More. Their mind goes right to those like locality type animals, that the
Got
wild
it.
caught look. And that was the first one I had when I was a kid. It was like a
Yeah.
$40, black and white
Yep.
banded. That was,
Yep.
that was it. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's definitely, at least I think that's what most people kind of envision when you say California king snake.
Gotcha. And then now when we get to like the two animals I just picked up from you, like the 50/50s per se that have some interesting phenotypes, is that just a result of general breeding and they come out all variable and those phenotypes get mixed up and that's just a result of random genetics, or is there something going on there genetically that's making those kinds of patterns?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the different patterns you're gonna get, it's very interesting because I found that certainly, which would make sense, though, the wild type pattern and the wild genes are almost always going to come through dominant, meaning you can take a solid white patternless, Cal King that you've selectively bred for who knows how many generations, and breed it to a black and white banded cow king, and you're going to
Right.
think, oh, you're going to see this like mix of aberrant snakes, and you're going to see, a lot of high whites because you've got this patternless animal. And sure, that might happen, but I mean, I've seen them come out just straight banded. I mean, to the point where
Okay.
you could drop them on the road and tell somebody you found it.
Okay.
It's very interesting because a lot of what we do with the breed is, selective breeding.
Yep.
But it's wild, sometimes what comes out of those clutches. And, I was just joking with somebody maybe a month or two ago, and, you put together two really nice reverse stripes. So they're a white snake with a black line down them, right? It's like
Yep.
the opposite of a scissors crossing, and you put together two nice reverse stripes. Everybody sees that and they're like, oh, cool, you're going to get a whole clutch of, reverse stripes. And you might only get one out of 10, that's an actual
Oh,
reverse
really?
stripe.
Okay.
You can get, I mean, some of my nicest, cleanest, like 50-50 banded Cal Kings have come from reverse stripe pairings. And,
Interesting.
and some of my nicest reverse stripes have come from patternless to banded pairings. So
Interesting. So even reverse stripe, like that's not even a genetic trait. It's just a straight phenotype that happens.
yep. Yeah, so
Interesting.
there's no recessive, like that's not a mutation. So there's no like
Okay.
recessive gene that brings that reverse stripe or any of
Okay.
the patterns. The patterns are just, you know the patterns are patterns. It's not there's genetic influence, of course, just from selective breeding. But other than that, there's no, recessive nature to them. It's not from an
Got it.
actual, gene, like a genetic mutation.
Got it. Cool. No, that's super interesting. I actually didn't know that. And especially like I've scrolled through Morph Market like in the Cow King category, and you see the way people label those things, but really they're not genetic traits. It's just kind of a descriptor of what the phenotype is doing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and some of them, of course, if you line breed something, really carefully, you're eventually going to weed some of that stuff out. So like
Right.
a lot of the wide reverse stripes, like, Tom Harold, TKC Reptiles. Tom's a good friend. He's got some killer snakes. I give him a hard time because he downsized a lot of his Cal Kings. And some poor sucker in South Florida got some of them. And so some of his lines are just awesome. I mean, they're
Okay.
super super consistent with throwing those black back animals. And a lot of that I think has to do with the fact that usually they're coming from some kind of mosaic line. So,
Okay.
so having that mosaic lineage, I think, kind of keeps that, a little bit more dominant, just because
Got
that's a
it.
codominant trait. So, if you breed a mosaic to, a banded, Cal King, you're going to get roughly half mosaics.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
and that's as far as I'm aware, unless somebody else has figured another gene out that does that. That's the only gene, only mutation in Cal Kings that does that is mosaic.
Okay.
So it's the
Got
only
it.
codominant trait.
Cool. Nice. Now in terms of your collection, what are some projects that you've kind of focused on over the years, or like what's kind of your thing now? Do you have a whole range of stuff, or if you want to kind of go over what you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I have a lot of variety. I wouldn't say my interests change within the breed, but at the same time, I certainly do have, some projects that I kind of take more interest in for a couple of years.
Okay.
I used to just really love high whites, trying to get, as much white and as clean white as you could. And after I was consistently doing that for a while, I feel like I kind of moved on from that. I've still got some
Okay.
really nice high white animals. But I really like trying to be a little bit more selective, and some of these, some of these multi-visual animals I'm working with, from lavender snow lines, kind of mixing that in with some multi-visual ghosts. There are multiple lavender lines too, so not all lavender cow kings are compatible with one another.
Right.
And I think that's something that not everybody is aware of. I think when people hear, "Oh, I've got a lavender and I'm going to buy another lavender," they just kind of assume that all of the offspring will be lavender, and that's not always the case. Um,
Okay.
I've got I've got lavender, visual lavender animals, that were supposed to be compatible, that I raised up for several years, and turns out they're not compatible. So,
Okay.
when those eggs hatch and you see, you're supposed to see a whole bunch of purple noses popping out, and all of a sudden you see a black nose. It
Yeah.
makes you a little frustrated.
Yeah.
but but yeah, I mean, that's another thing I think that kind of throws a wrench into it too. You've got lavender lines, even in some of the lavender snow stuff, you've got multiple different lavender lines influencing those animals. And, you look at some of the lavender snows that, like from Tom Stevens line, or
Right.
some of the ones like Clayton Carlisle has, they're all stunning animals, but sometimes you look at them and you're like, wow, that's a lavender snow too. It's Some of them are really, really heavy on that like dark purple lavender look, and then others are almost patternless. And
Okay.
and you'll see those examples. Uh, I'm pulling a blank on the name of the website, but Ross Padilla put a whole website together, Southern California kingsnake.com or something like that,
Okay.
where he goes through like the history of all of the morphs of cow kings, like where they came from, locality animals, hypo lines, lavender snow. And it's really interesting, some of the information he put together. Super helpful too, for somebody who doesn't really know much about cow kings to go on that website and reference. But
Yeah.
you'll see those lavender snows, they hatch out. Some of them hatch out with a lot of pattern, and over a couple of years, that pattern disappears and fades away. And
Interesting.
I don't really know what causes that. It's interesting, because not all of them do that. I mean, I've produced some now with very similar genetics that keep that darker purple color. And they're
Okay.
not purple passions. They're not just straight lavender hypermel animals. They are lavender snows, but they keep more of a purple color. So
Interesting.
yeah, it is. And some of the and that's where I was kind of alluding to with the multiple albino genes, where you've got, and this is something I was kind of suspicious of. Some animals I got a whole bunch of years ago from Tom Stevens. Some of the albinos just looked different. I mean, they just looked more colorful, like a T positive would look. Um,
Right.
and eventually, after 8, 9, whatever years of selectively breeding and just kind of playing with the genes, it's like, yeah, it's obviously that's exactly what's going on. You breed two visual albino animals together and half the offspring come out hypermel. It's like, obviously those are not compatible, albinos.
Yeah.
So that I think is where a lot of the color comes in, from that T positive, kind of lane somewhere in those lavender snow lines. And then
Got it.
I my theory is the T negatives are the ones that kind of fade out like that. But
Okay.
I don't know for sure. I think that's probably what it is, but I don't know.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. And what you were mentioning before about that website, that's actually really cool that someone did that. I wish that occurred more across other species, and I wish it was more like public knowledge, because like I wish someone could do that with something like Texas rats, because I know there's more mutations in those that just aren't commonly available in the hobby that like even I don't have. Like I work with quite a few of the standards, but I know there's some people in the hobby that kind of just hold on to this information and it's not anywhere public. And I just love to learn about it. I really would, and learn that
Yeah,
history.
I don't know why, to me, I don't really get it. As people like kind of are very secretive about certain things, and
Yeah.
they think they've got like this special project, or or they're gonna somehow keep somebody else from getting this information. It's like I don't get it. I mean, John and I were always like super open with people ask
Yeah.
him about his bird eaters or his king rats, or and I mean he'll happily tell everybody everything and talk to people. It's like
Yeah.
why would you not want to share whatever
Yeah.
knowledge you have?
Offered to come to my house to have me feed these damn bird eaters. So I actually just got the male to eat.
Oh,
He didn't
nice.
eat a meal. He didn't eat a meal earlier in the week. The female did. Then today I tried I learned per Jane Hood's YouTube that there's this little beat up method that you do with them. And I did it. It worked on the female. I got lit up in the process. My hands are now scarred. The male didn't want to take it, but I just left it in a deli cup, which John also recommended, and he ate it. So I'm very happy about that. But
Yeah.
to the audience who didn't know, I did pick up a pair of neotropical bird eaters, Bacillinotus from John, and I got a pair of Cow Kings from Mike. So super, super excited about those animals. But yeah, anyway, back to the subject. Yeah, it's weird that people kind of gatekeep that information, and it's super cool, and it's a breath of fresh air when you have people that are very open and willing to share that information, because that's what it's about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so you obviously, you mentioned you've been breeding for a long time, keeping. Can you kind of go over your general breeding routine when it comes to these guys? Like, how do you work your cycles at least? And I know, every time I describe my cycles, I say it's worked for me. I'm not sure if it'll work for you. There's always environmental factors, but if you can kind of give a breakdown of what you do when it comes to breeding your cow kings, go right ahead.
Sure. Yeah, so I've done it both ways over the years, because so many people kind of convinced me, especially when I was young and just starting. I mean, I think I bred my first pair of Cow Kings when I was maybe 16 or 17, and
Nice.
and I was totally convinced that you had to brumate them. I was like, oh
Okay.
no, this is, I'm like, they don't belong here. They're from California. It has to get cold. I'm like, you've
Yeah.
got to like induce winter, you've got to put them through brumation. And so I have brumated my animals off and on. Frankly, I didn't always have the ability to do that easily. So
Right.
I've done it both ways. Usually, what I do now, I don't even remember the last time I brumated. It's been many years.
Okay.
So I let everything be, essentially as natural as possible. So far as the light cycles, I will let for my subadults and adults, not for my juveniles, but for my older animals, I will let the temps drop.
Okay.
On those occasions that it does get colder here, I won't turn the heat on.
Okay.
I'll let them drop, and then between that and the light cycles, because they're all getting natural light through the windows too. Um, that I think is the most important factor, is just keeping those natural light cycles and those temperature fluctuations that kind of mimic that same response, I guess, as brumation. Obviously, it's not down here. It's not going to be staying, at a perfect 58 degrees for three
Yep.
months. It's going to be, hey, you get a couple cold nights, you go off
Yep.
feed for a couple weeks, and then we get a warm spell, and you eat a little bit, and then you go off feed for a couple weeks again. And that that's worked really well for me. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, there are some years where you know somebody will say something and I kind of second guess it, and I'm like, oh well, I did have 5 females not breed this year. But then it's like I have to remind myself, it is a hobby for me. It's not,
Right.
I don't go out and like pair them up every day or every 3 days or whatever. I mean, it's just something that when I get a chance, I try to pair them, and it's Cal Kings are not a species that you can just throw in together and walk away. So
Yeah.
they will eat each other
Oh, yeah. Well,
every time.
that was gonna be one of my questions is how many cannibalism attempts have there been? How many have you had
Oh,
to stop?
oh, attempts plenty. That's, I mean, they're brutal sometimes, and
Yeah.
it's funny because you know you'll have the same animals pair for years in a row, and so you just kind of assume like, oh, they're good, like they breed every year, and you
Right.
don't watch as closely, and then all of a sudden, a couple minutes later, you walk back by and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
what she's got them wrapped and she's trying to swallow them.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. You just never know. I mean, whether they're fed well or not, Cal Kings are not terribly
Yep.
predictable when it comes to that.
Yeah. Definitely. I know I in my time I pulled apart a couple pairs before. Um,
Yeah,
it's not a fun task, but it's obviously, you want to keep your snakes safe. So,
yeah.
but cool. Um, now another thing I wanted to ask, just overall kind of about your collection. So you mentioned you've been doing this for so long. So where did some of your original stock come from? And then
Ooh.
now, like coming into today, just history wise for people to know. And then even today, like, are you still bringing new stuff in? Or are you kind of just going off of fully your own collection? What's going on with that stuff?
Yeah, good question. I'm hard pressed to think of names from like way back. I
Yeah.
did downsize, so I was really fortunate. My parents were incredibly tolerant for some reason of my
Yeah.
hobby when I was a kid. So when I went to college, I was able to keep some of my stuff. I did have to
Okay.
downsize. And then over the years there, when I was able to, I kind of grew my collection again. And then I moved out of the country for vet school. Um, so needless to say, I mean, I had to get rid of essentially my entire collection. I got to keep like my 3 favorite animals, and my parents took care of them for me.
Okay.
But other than that, I started off fresh, like essentially fresh, like 12 years ago.
Okay.
Um, so I mean, I've gotten like kind of random animals here and there where I don't even know the lines. I have some that I got from Tom Stevens for some of the lavender snow stuff. I got
Yeah.
some ghost lines from some of the like the light phase ghosts from Clayton Carlisle. Mesozoic reptiles. He's got
Okay.
killer animals. And then Tom Harold of TKC. He's kind of hooked me up with a bunch of just awesome Cal Kings over the last several years. So I have kind of played around with bringing new stuff in, even for some of the lines that I've got 3 generations in now. I still like to kind of mix it up a little bit. I don't. I mean, I like the genetic diversity, so I don't
Yeah,
want
of
to kind of
course.
end up with, especially when you're trying to produce very unique animals, it's hard because a lot of times the easiest way to figure out, okay, hey, what are the genes here? You end up breeding, one male to 2 different females, and then you breed those offspring back to each other, and it's like, okay, well, they're, it's the same sire, so it's not much diversity.
Right.
So yeah, I do like to bring some new animals in and get some fresh blood, basically. Most of the stuff I have now, though, I've got different lines going that I've done just that with. I'll get some from one breeder, and then I'll pull some in, and just totally switch it up and kind of combine things. I mean, I've got one project that I'm doing that's really unique. It's kind of a mosh pit of genes, so I'm not getting rid of any of the animals until I figure it all
Okay.
out. So I think I've got like 25, 26 holdbacks, I think.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and it's basically a combination of, Ghost, Hypermel, at least two different lines of lavender, T positive and T negative albino. Um, and so you've got at least five recessive genes all in
Okay.
the same animals, and not only five recessives, but one of the lines that I pulled in was from some chocolate bananas. So you've got that
Gotcha.
selectively bred, banana or high yellow coloration coming into it too. And I'm starting to see that play out in the offspring, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to pull up your Instagram just to see if we can kind of take a look at some mutations. You posted a good selection during
I was gonna say
Daytona,
I've
so if
got
we
I've,
want
I've got bad pictures. I always joke with John about that. He goes out and takes these awesome pictures. I'm like, your snakes are cool enough, man. Stop taking such good pictures. I like to try and rush and snap a picture in a cup,
yeah.
but but yeah, I mean, I've got some of the more common morphs posted. I think a
Okay.
lot of my multi-visual stuff I don't even post because I'm not selling it or anything. So
Right. So like even this, like this is just a standard albino and then
so
anything
that
going on?
actually that is an albino natita.
Oh,
So
yeah, this one
that
I was eyeing at the show and that
I,
color was
I
so
know
cool.
I'm having to like lean in. I'm like, which snake is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I got from Tom Harold. I've actually got the adult pair too, and they are killer. They're
Okay.
both solid stripes. So I've got the female's albino with a solid stripe, and the male is not albino. He's het. And he's that really deep chocolate color with a lighter
Okay.
dorsal stripe, which is just awesome. But that was the only kind of different hatchling that came out from them. Everybody else had a complete dorsal stripe.
Gotcha. And the Natita that you mentioned, that was the first time I ever saw that word. What exactly is that?
So that's kind of more like a locale subspecies kind of.
Oh, okay, okay.
So it's a very specific group of animals.
Gotcha.
um
Okay.
it's almost like, at least, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, maybe I'm gonna end up putting my foot in my mouth with the natita. But it's kind of like, more regional, like if you hear like mendotas,
Okay.
whereas natita, from my understanding though, is like an actual subspecies.
Oh,
Whereas
interesting.
like the others, like Mendota or like Marina del Rey, other locality animals that you're talking about, those aren't actual different subspecies. So
Got it.
that's my understanding of it. I hope that's correct.
Okay. No, gotcha. And then something like this that I have up now, is this one of the Lav Snows?
So yeah, that's a Lav Snow.
Okay.
I got her from Eric Keikel up in New York.
Okay. I
He's
know Eric personally. Actually, he used to
okay.
come into my pet store. I've been trying to get him on
Oh,
this show
cool.
because I he has some really good stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I kind of know him a little bit over the years because he used to come into the shop sometimes. But yeah,
gotcha. Yeah, he's a great guy.
yeah, definitely. And his animals are badass. He has a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool Lamprepeltis and in general.
Yep, for sure.
Let's take a look at this guy. Yeah, this was some of the stuff at the show. Okay, so these are T positive, and I could see that because there's a lot more
Yeah, a lot more
definition, kind of.
colorful. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so I've got so I did have some really good T positive blizzard lines that were
Okay.
that were pretty cool because they're gonna come out. They're gonna kind of look like just a super fired up blizzard. I mean, the yellows and a
Right.
little bit of orange coloration almost on the ventrum is wild on some of those.
Okay.
And a lot of times they'll have like more of that banded look that's on the screen now, or some of them are striped too, which is really cool.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's definitely the difference when you start mixing those T positive animals in. The colors are going to pop a lot more. Just
Yeah.
just like any other species that T positive is available for.
Yeah. I mean, I could say for myself, just in general, I don't know why. I guess over the years I feel like I've stayed away from, or not stayed away from, like I've strayed more towards the T positive stuff just because I really like that more enhanced color on stuff. The T negative, just with some of like the faded out color palette, I don't know, it just doesn't do it for me as much. But I really
Sure.
like the brightness of some of T positive animals, and those were some cool ones with all that, that bright yellow and that kind of lavender tone.
Yeah, no, I agree that T positive definitely pulls it out a lot more. I mean, I think those are, and that's again, not to say the last snow stock, but I mean that's what I'm really trying to figure out with that is I'm trying to kind of separate that out and
Gotcha.
use that T positive influence a little bit more, instead of just kind of being like, it's a lap snow, like really really figuring out what
Got
line
it.
it is.
Got it. Cool. Um, and this one's just one of your.
That's
This
just a
is just
reverse
like a
stripe.
standard. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that's it's kind of like I mean, she's kind of dirty. She's got a lot of color on the sides.
Right.
A lot of people prefer like a solid white animal with that black dorsal stripe, but I mean, I'd still
Okay.
call her a reverse stripe.
Got it.
She's just not a really nice clean one.
Okay. Cool.
But
Um.
that one down in the middle, that's a lav snow kind of mix batch.
Okay.
That's just so there's two patternless hypermels in there. There's two lav snows, and that's actually a good one to see the difference because it's kind of hard to see there, but you'd almost think that both of those. So that one right slap in the center is very clearly
Yeah.
a lav snow. And then the two kind of closer to the bottom, one on the left, one on the right, you'd kind of like brush off as blizzards right away. But one of those two is actually a lav snow as well. It's
Interesting.
just it's just a much much lighter animal.
And then this is what the
Wh-
all black one. Sorry if you don't see my cursor.
those are patternless hypermelanistic. So that
Okay.
this pairing or this clutch resulted from excuse me, a patternless lavender snow male bred to a patternless hypermelanistic female. So the
Gotcha.
male looked like, and I can't remember the which one is which just from the little picture on my phone that I'm seeing, but
Yeah.
the male basically looked like one of those two on the bottom where it was like almost
Okay.
looked like a blizzard. But he's a lav snow, and the female looked like one of the ones to the top left that's just solid
Interesting.
solid dark.
Okay. That's cool. I didn't know really you could get like it I mean it's almost a MBK at that point.
Yeah,
Mexican
a
Black
lot
King.
of a lot of people see them and they're like, "Oh, it's Mexican black for sure." That's a common thing you get
Yeah.
for sure.
Cool. Cool, man. I mean, yeah, like I was kind of talking about, and for people who are watching me scroll through the Instagram, I mean, there's always just so much variability with the cow kings. That's like one of my favorite things with certain species. And I think that's something that really hits for me is the almost unlimited amount of phenotypes you can hit, even with just some normal animals. and it's really cool to watch them grow and develop. And something like Cow Kings really kind of scratches that itch for me, because it's almost like you never know what you're gonna get, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's that
Yeah,
that definitely makes it a lot more fun, just because it's one of those things where, like I said before, you can put two animals that that look the same together, and that doesn't mean a thing for their offspring.
yeah. Now
So
this thing, I don't know if you're looking at the screen right now. This thing is badass.
yeah, so that guy, I produced that one last year from a mosaic het lavender female to a wide reverse striped male. So
Okay.
I kept him just in case he's 50% chance that he's het lavender.
Okay.
The biggest problem is I don't know what strain of lavender. So
Gotcha.
it's we'll see. We'll see if that brings me anything or not. But I plan on pairing him up with a lavender dot dash that I produced last year as well.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Cool. So that was a good little scroll through of the collection there. Yeah, that's why I like the YouTube, because I kind of get to do that and show off some of the people's Instagram, and we can kind of scroll through. But no, that's all really cool stuff, man. Like I said, I'm excited to be working with Cal Kings again. I think it's just gonna be fun watching these little two grow. But it seems like you're doing really cool stuff with your collection and stuff. Um, Now I did want to ask also, like, if you can shed some light on this a little bit. What is like the market look like for Cow Kings? Because in my opinion, I always consider them, they're an industry staple. They're like one of those few choices where if someone asks like what's a good beginner snake, like Cow King fits that niche 100%. Um,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, the biggest thing that I've seen, I mean, in general, the market now is kind of lousy. Um, I think a big shift for Cal Kings specifically was, when Europe basically outlawed the breeding of them a couple years ago,
oh,
and all of
okay,
the import export. So, whereas a couple of years back, you could box up 100 of them and ship them over to Europe. Now you can't do that anymore. So I don't, and I
gotcha.
don't know how many guys were actually exporting Cal Kings, but it's not only the Asian market that gets them, it was, a lot of the European market as well. Or
Right.
they were kind of pit stopping, they were going through dealers in Europe, and then their
Yep.
final destination was probably going to be somewhere in Asia.
Right.
But now that's all been eliminated. So
Yeah.
I
I did
think
not
for
know
me
that. So
that,
that's news. That's news to me. I didn't even know
yeah,
that.
yeah, it started out, from my understanding, it started out because, they found some cow king in the Canary Islands, and it was, of
Oh.
course, doing its cow king thing, and it was eating all the wildlife, which, yeah, it's gonna happen. Like, whether somebody let it go, or or it escaped or whatever. But um, we know all about that here in Florida. So
Yeah.
it's it doesn't really do a lot of good to outlaw things that are already established in the environment.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate, because I know you guys have your good relationship with Colubra. I had them on, and I know I talked to John about them, so I'm sure you were doing some good stuff with them at least a few years ago. But so yeah, that kind of sucks.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
but no, I mean, I think it's just kind of that, it's that waiting game. Are people gonna panic? And if you're messing with somebody's livelihood and that's their job, are they going to drop their price to try and sell them? And then when somebody
Right.
drops their price, then how many other people are going to drop their price? It's like, it's just like anything else, that competitive nature to it. I mean, I still see some guys listing high whites, for $200 on Morph Market, and then I'll see one that's listed at like $80, and it's like
Yeah.
there's not as much consistency, I think, with it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's still just very random sales.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I'm not as good as I should be so far as like really pushing and advertising and sales and stuff, because like I said, it's a hobby for me. But
Yeah.
um, but it's yeah, I mean, this time of year when I've got a couple hundred hatchlings, I'm like, oh yeah, I probably need to post more.
Yeah. No, I
So
gotcha. And I was gonna ask, like, how has Morph Market fared for you on the Cow King side? Because, like I said, I've dipped into a few months, or maybe a month or two ago. Like, I would scroll through the Cow King category, and one, there's just so many snakes, and two, a lot that look pretty similar. So it's like I'm
yeah.
sure there's a lot of sellers who there, I should say, there's quite a few sellers who have quite a few animals on there. So I'm sure it's kind of, I don't want to say hard to make your mark, but I'm sure you're in the mix there.
Yeah, it is for sure. I think the guys that are gonna do really well are the ones that are gonna, have the time and the patience to really take quality, pictures of the animals.
Yeah.
Certainly that makes a huge difference. I mean, you see any of Mesozoic reptiles, and it's like, oh man, his
Yeah.
pictures are so awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And it's
that makes
definitely
me
time
want to buy them.
consuming. It's
Yeah.
definitely time consuming to take all those pictures of all those colubrids. Even
Yeah.
I'll sit in here for a half hour taking pictures of like one clutch of Texas rats, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And like me sitting in the light box, putting the deli cup over them, and like sitting here for a few minutes. Okay, settle
Yep.
down, buddy. And then it's like, all right, then you take your picture, or at least hope you grab a good angle.
Right.
And but yeah, it's a mess to try to photograph these things.
Yes. Well, for me too, a lot of the whites and the yellows, it's hard sometimes to get it to where it
Right.
actually looks as white or as yellow as it does. Like, it's like you get either a white animal looks like it's got a yellow tinge to it, or vice versa, and it's like then people are like, "Well, is it really white?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, it's not
Yeah.
like, it's pretty darn white."
Yeah.
But
And I could say when it comes to that, like photography, like I could go outside and take pictures of ball pythons all day, but that's because I could have them in my hand and they don't move. They'll sit in
right,
your palm the whole time.
right,
Whereas a colubrid, you do not get that luxury. It's
yeah,
like see how fast you can hold it and try to snap as many pictures as you can, because I know I've done that before. It's
yeah.
either that or I take reels. It's like I can't get outdoor pictures of these animals, or hope I could get a good, like, they're coiled up nice in their tub and I kind of just run over to good lighting. I'm like, snap that picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Um okay, cool. Was there anything I kind of missed on the Cow Kings before we move on from them? Any other like important topic that you think we should
I
hit?
don't I don't think so.
Oh, what about,
It's
I was gonna say, what about diet? What are you doing in terms of that?
I mean, so far as mine now, I exclusively do mice. And I do frozen thawed mice. Um
Okay.
I used to probably I stopped maybe a couple of years ago. I used to give a lot of my breeding females, I would give them I'd alternate like rat pups and mice,
Okay.
just to kind of help them keep their weight on a little bit better.
Yep.
Just because a little higher fat content, a little bit, just kind of seemed to help. But I mean, thankfully I really I certainly don't overbreed my animals. And so I don't really have as much of an issue keeping weight on. So I kind of felt like that was a little bit silly for me to do. So I just went back to, if I've got a female that I know is going to drop a big clutch, I just feed her, more frequently.
Gotcha. Yeah. I used to do some rats for like the Texas rats and stuff, but I've pretty much switched over to all mice and quail, and I like keeping them lean a little bit better. And I think I'm just gonna start a little more like cycle feeding, like as we build up, and we're kind of getting to that time of the year where we're getting closer to that fall time. So I'm gonna feed probably smaller meals like twice a week or something, or every 5 days instead of every 7, just to get that kind of ramp up and then before cooling, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that I don't. I mean, honestly, most of the time I'm seeing snakes as patients. You know, a lot of times they are ball pythons,
Yeah.
but or larger species, you know, boas. But um, that's a very, very common thing I see with ball pythons for sure, is that they come in and they're just way overweight, you know, and
Okay.
I, you know, and when I start asking people, you know, it's like, how often are you feeding? You know, what size meal? You know, you just you kind of wonder like, why did you think to do that? You know, like, it's just for curiosity, like, who told you to do that? Like, you know, Facebook or the pet store, or you know.
Yeah.
But
So
and
I'm actually curious because I definitely have some ball python viewers. What's your definition of overweight on a ball python?
so you know, if you're, thankfully, you know, it's nice and easy if they are balled up, right? You can literally, like
Yeah.
you said, you can just pick them up in a ball. So
Yep.
you should never see that back. Their top line should never be flat. And you should never
Okay.
have like an indentation where the spine is, because if you're seeing that, that's a an obese animal.
Okay.
You know, I mean, so you don't want to see, like, you don't want to look down their back and see, you know, an A frame, you know,
Yep.
because then they're way too thin. But you definitely don't want to see their top line like flatten out. And
Got it.
that's something we see happen a lot. Is,
Okay.
you know, people, you know, kind of think that, oh, you know, somebody told me I need to feed my snake every single week, and you know, so they've got a, you know, a 3-year-old ball python, and they're feeding it, you know, like a medium-sized rat every week,
Yeah.
and you know, the thing is probably, you know, 400 grams overweight already.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
it's
think the ball python breeding industry has like taught people like, oh, feed heavier, this and that. Like I'm always I could say I'm a weekly feeder, but I don't go above a small rat like ever.
yeah,
Um no matter the size. But even with that, even when my animals, cuz sometimes they'll just be weird and like they'll take some weeks off of feeding. Like the balls, like I've had some adult females in the middle of the summer that just did not want to eat. I'm like, okay, no problem. Is like I don't stress over it. I think that's
yeah,
another thing is like people stress when a snake, especially a ball python that has all these like fat reserves, is like not eating for a little bit. I'm just like, no sweat on my back. I don't have
yeah,
to pay for your meal this week, and
yeah,
we're good. When you want to eat, you'll figure it out.
exactly. Yeah, and that is, I mean, I've only kept a couple ball pythons, just, you know, as pets many years ago, but um I mean, that was a big thing with them. You know, and I think that's pretty common with that species, especially the males. You know, the males during breeding season, forget it. I mean, you'll have a male go off feed for 5 months. You know, and they don't even, surprisingly, they don't even seem to drop all that much of their body weight, which I find
Yeah.
amazing.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you know, ball pythons that are acting totally normal, that look great body condition wise, that go off food for a little bit, I don't care at all.
Yeah. Um, Maybe an interesting question that you'd have better perspective of as a vet. Just in terms of diet, what do you think is the ideal or the best prey item? And maybe that's a hard general question for all species, but like in general, what do you find to be like the best? Yeah, if you could put a best on it.
Yeah, I mean, that is tough, because you know, certainly you're going to see, you know, it is. obviously species dependent.
Right.
You know, I mean, like you're seeing, you know, with John's bird eaters. I mean, you know, those, yeah, sure, they, you know, they'll eat rodents, but you know, they're called bird eaters for a reason, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so they'll eat chicks and you know, chicken eggs and quail and stuff like that. But I don't think there's necessarily like an ideal food item necessarily. Um, I think it's more just the size of the meal that's more important, and the
Okay.
frequency of feeding. You know,
Got it.
I think a lot of people that have the intention to breed their snakes, I think the whole power feeding is really like a big thing. You know, it's like, oh, let's get them to eat every 3 or 4 days, you know, and
Right.
try and get them to breeding size at 2 years of age. um you know, I mean, I personally don't do that. I mean, a lot of my snakes don't breed until they're 4 years old.
Okay.
You know, and I joke. I don't know if Tom logged on to watch this or not, but I joke with Tom all the time. I'm like, you know, he's got his own live rodents that he breeds, and so his snakes eat really well. And I always joke, I'm like, man, I'm always 2 years behind you. Like, I'm like, if you hatch one, you know, in 23, it's gonna breed in 25. I'm like, just because they
Right.
eat so well. But you know, but it's funny because if you talk to him, he does not power feed. Like, he feeds appropriate sized meals, and a normal for like kind of like a weekly frequency.
Right.
Um, but that's the biggest thing, is just picking the right size meal and not, you know, you know, you feed a snake, you know, a pinky a week for the first 8 months of its life, and you know, it's not going to grow very much. But
Yep.
you know, you get a good meal size, and they'll grow more normally.
Yeah.
So
And I do agree what you said, that like 4 years. I think that's a real nice sweet spot with a lot of colubrids. Is like, I think people try to push that 3, and in my opinion, I just don't think it's worth it for
yeah.
long term breeding success. That animal's health on that potential clutch, like 4 plus, I just think is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think four for my Cal Kings. For corns, usually I'm breeding those by 3.
Okay.
Um, but just they just seem to kind of, at least from my experience, they just seem to kind of grow into that more adult size pretty quickly. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it's pretty darn rare for females, at least. I should specify, for females, I'm usually not breeding my female cow kings at 3 years old.
Got it. Okay. Cool. And you mentioned the corn, so that's a good little transition there. So besides the cow kings, the only other colubrid species you're keeping are some corns?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple Mexican black kings, and then
Okay.
I've got a small corn collection.
Got it.
You know, and I kind of, that's like one of those things where I just had like a sucker moment. You know, I it's just the variety gets me every time, man. You know,
Yeah.
the different patterns and colors that you can get in corn snakes just never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got, you know, just random, all kind of random stuff. I mean, I've got one scaleless just because
Okay.
I always said I was like, I'm never gonna own a scaleless. I think they're weird. I just don't really like them. And you know, I got one last year. So um
Hey, you need a
but
scaleless Texas rat. I got you there.
okay, all right, there you go. Maybe I'll get suckered into one of those next year. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I've still got one ball python she's just kind of like a pet. I picked her
Okay.
up from Eric Chung. Um, he used to live real close to me. Now he's a couple hours away, but um,
Right.
he's got some great ball pythons. I just picked one up. It just her she's just a straight piebald. Her
Okay.
pattern got me, and I liked her, so I was like, yeah, why
Nice.
not? Um,
Yeah.
and then I've got a pair of Argentine boas, that
Okay.
I absolutely love. They're awesome animals. That I actually was gifted those by a client.
Oh, nice.
So those are, yeah, they're super, super special animals to me. They're awesome. They are 4 years old now.
Nice.
So I'm hoping to maybe breed those in, another like 2 years.
Okay.
So
Very nice.
yeah.
Cool. And then you also mentioned, let's talk about the day geckos, because you got those working, and you guys post them
Yeah.
occasionally on the page. Some
Yeah.
cool
So
stuff.
yeah, I've been breeding. I've kind of dabbled in a couple different day gecko species. So I've had the Laticata, the gold, which are the gold dust. I've had
Okay.
I had Williams eye too. So I had the electric blue day geckos, but it they just didn't do it for me. I mean, I love the color, and they're a very small species, which is pretty cool. You can very comfortably keep them in like an 18 by 18 exoterra type setup, but um I just the grandest, the giant day geckos, that's what gets me.
Yeah.
I don't I picked up so I've actually I started out with a mix. John actually got me really hooked on them. I always wanted one as a kid, and I never got one. And it's like
Okay.
every time I would see one in the pet store, I'm like, I really want that, but I just never bought it. And then he went down with his wife and their two boys down to the Keys, and they caught some. And
Okay.
I was like, dude, I've got to have one of those things. Those are so cool. And so I ended up, he gave me some, and then I ended up buying some high red animals from a breeder out in Colorado, and then I ended up getting some from Kurt Lance as well. And then Julie Bergman, I think I got two from her. So I kind of just started mixing in bloodlines, kind of like I do with my Cal Kings. I just wanted to get that variety there. From
Right.
Kurt, I got Paradox. So that's like those things are just wild. I can't even describe it. It's like they don't look real when they color up, like, and they become blue like that.
Yeah.
But what my favorite ones, honestly, are the cherry heads. So
Okay.
they're super fun to work with, because they're typically, I usually tell people, they're a look don't touch species, because a lot of times if you try and get them to the point where you're holding them and like walking around with them, they, to me, a lot of them look like they kind of get stressed out with it.
Okay.
Like they kind of darken a little bit, or their body language kind of changes, and they just don't look comfortable. um Whereas if you're just like interacting with them in their enclosure, like I've got mine in really big Reptibreeze enclosures outside. So like if I go out and I'm going out with like fresh MRP, um, I'll open it up, and one of my males will actually like chirp, and he'll like kind of
Oh, okay.
like chirp and chatter and like run up, and he'll jump on my hand and eat right from my hand. But I never try and like pet him or anything. I
Okay.
just let him do his thing, and I'm just like, okay, this is cool. And they'll pretty much, I mean, it's pretty rare for them to not become accustomed to you. I really do like their personalities, but they're a jumpy species. I mean, and they are fast. They're a lot faster than you would expect. They kind of look
Gotcha.
like they kind of look like like similar to a leopard gecko in like their body, I
Yeah.
guess. In the sense that like they just don't really look like they're gonna move all that fast. But yeah, when they get going, they haul. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of excited, because I've been the last probably it's probably been almost a year now. I decided I've had my cherry heads. I've kind of selectively bred for more red coloration, so like what people call crimsons, um,
Okay.
where they've just got a lot more red on their body. And then the cherry heads, as the name implies, their whole head is essentially red. Um, and so I've selectively bred those lines where I've got some really stellar looking animals. And last year I started breeding one of my cherry head females to the paradox male. And so, I'm kind of raising all of those up now just to see,
Okay.
what happens, because paradox is something that, Kurt Lance has worked on for, I think he said like 20 something years. I mean, he's selectively bred those animals for a very, very long time. So, and
Very
that's why
nice.
he's getting all these wild, like, I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff, but he's got like
I have not.
nightshade, and oh, you've got to look. It doesn't look real.
Okay.
I mean, it looks like somebody like dipped him in ink and, did weird shit to him.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he'll have these bright green animals, and then they'll just have like black up their side. And it's almost like
Okay.
a black version of like piebald. It's like instead of
Interesting.
white, there's just black, or like really dark pigment. Um, I think he calls those nightshade. I don't have any of that, but the paradox, basically, they're either visual or non-visual when they hatch from the egg. The visual, they have like kind of a bluish color on their head,
Okay.
and then as they grow, sometimes the red will fade, sometimes the green will turn blue. But a lot of times you don't see those color changes until they're like 12 months old, sometimes even older than that. I know I've sold some of my geckos from my cherry headlines because, it's like I mean, you can't possibly keep them all and raise them all up for a full year and then be like, oh,
Right.
that one's my favorite.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I've sold some that I'm like, ooh, I think this one's probably going to be pretty nice. And then I see a picture of it, later, that person will message me and be like, oh my God, look how red it turned. I'm like, oh, I'm like, I would have
Yeah.
kept that one. But yeah, that kind of makes it, a little bit more exciting with those guys too, because they definitely have a lot of color change as they age. And I don't think with the paradox gene, I don't think that's really fully understood. And the
Okay.
variation with it is just crazy. I mean, I just, every time I see the new stuff he hatches, I'm like, that's just so cool. I mean, it's just so interesting how that stuff works. But yeah, so I've kind of mashed his paradox line in with my cherry head in the hopes of getting some, you know, bright blue animals with a ton of red on them too. So
Yeah.
we'll see if that happens. I don't know.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Awesome. Now I did want to ask, so what's it been like? So obviously, you work with John, that partnership. Sometimes those don't always go well, but it seems like you guys have been going pretty strong. So I want to kind of know what that relationship is like. And then I also want to know, fun bonus is, out of his species, which is your favorite?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Yeah, so it's funny. John and I met through a friend that I referenced earlier that passed away a couple of years ago, Fred Grunwald. And it was a very funny way we met. At the time, John had a bunch of Florida Kings, and he really liked the locality stuff. And he was keeping a lot of like locality snakes at the time. And Fred knew that I loved Cow Kings, and I was Fred's vet. And so I'd go out and I just, we just shoot the shit. And he's telling me one day, he's like, oh, I got this, I know this guy, he loves king snakes. I think you two would get along. It
Yeah.
was like kind of like a funny, awkward, transition. And I'm like being set up with a friend here or something. And and
John
so
told this story from his perspective, and it was like almost the same,
yeah,
just
yeah.
the other
it,
side.
That's funny. Yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. We literally met out at Fred's house, and I
Okay.
think I think neither of us were expecting to actually become friends.
Yeah.
But we became, really close friends. And I don't even know how many years ago that was now, honestly. I can't remember. Um
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be a good 10 years ago. Um
Okay.
so, but yeah, I mean, we just kind of started hanging out. and we started kind of like swapping snakes back and forth. Like I gave him a couple Cal Kings for a little while, or he would give me like an Everglades rat or whatever,
Okay.
and and then, it's funny, I joke with him all the time about his Barons Racers, because I remember when he got the green Barons Racers and he was so excited about those snakes. And he was like, dude, you got to get some of these. He was like, these things are so cool. And I remember I was standing there looking at them. I was like, I mean, they're cool, dude, but like, I don't, it doesn't really do it for me. Like, I don't really want any. And now I'm like, you can't, people harass him all day, every day to
Yeah.
try to buy those snakes. And it's
Yeah.
like, man, the market on those is insane.
Yeah.
So I give him shit all the time. I'm like, yeah, maybe I should have maybe I should have gotten into those. I'm like, at least yours sell like hotcakes. But I just can't get away from the Cal Kings. That's my thing. But
Yeah.
his snakes, for your other question though, his snakes, I mean, for me, hands down, it's the bird eaters.
Okay.
I mean, I think his king rats are awesome. For me, they're very intimidating. Like that look to them. I think that's really
Right.
cool because they just look the part, like they're just this big, badass, angry looking snake. Um,
Yeah.
but I think just the variation and what he's done with his breeding for the colors, um and his selective breeding to like prove out like his like red line and the lavender type colors. I mean, it's just awesome. And the way those animals interact too, and just watching them in more of like an arboreal type enclosure,
Right.
they're just really cool animals. And
Yeah.
they've been a lot of fun to watch. And it's really cool, what he's done over the years with those, seen from his first ones where it's like they were kind of like, okay, yeah, it kind of looks like he just snatched it out of a tree. Like it's like kind of like,
Right.
yellowish, greenish, like it kind of like not like boring or dull colors, but nothing crazy.
Yeah.
Um and so watching, over the last like couple generations, now he's hatching these out, and by the time they're 6 months old, you're already seeing the orange and red come through, and it's like, man, like that when that thing's a couple years old, it's gonna be super bright colored. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
So
just
on the
crazy.
couple I have, even like you see some of the colors a little bit when they're I'll call them when they're being calm, but then when they're puffed, then you really see some extra color come in from the pattern and stuff. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like,
Yeah,
that's cool. And I can't wait to see when they get
yeah,
older. I know he's pumped I got them, and he's very much wants to help like hold my hand to make sure I like do everything the right way, because I think he wants to see me succeed with them, which is really cool of him. But yeah, I'm just super excited about those.
yeah, no, for sure. And and John and I were talking about that earlier, actually, so far as kind of going back to what you were saying with people like gatekeeping information and stuff, the way we look at it is, if I love something, why would I not want somebody else to love it too? And
Yeah.
that's how John is with all his stuff too. Like he's passionate about his snakes, and so he wants people to love them as much as he does.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
really cool. And I do think, you know I do think that's like sadly a little bit more of a unique thing,
Right.
for a lot of the breeders that are out there. I feel like a lot of them don't really have that level of passion behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. Definitely. Before we get into kind of some of the wrap ups, we had one last question here from Purple Church. Are platinum Cal Kings a T positive albino or a hypo? I've been hearing different takes on them.
No, so they're not. Platinums are basically lavender with white bands instead of the yellow bands. So if you go on that website, if you type in Southern California kingsnakes.com, I think. That should direct you to it if that's not the actual website.
Okay.
That website gives you a whole backstory on like Davey Vickers and the guys that were working with the Platinum Cal Kings a long time ago. And it gives you the backstory on basically how they got to that lavender with the white bands.
Cool.
But yeah, platinums are not hypo and they're not T negative albino.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, so kind of getting into some of the wrap up questions we have here. I like asking people, so like what's a big motivator for what keeps you going in the reptiles in general?
You know, I think it's just the thought of doing like creating something new, and that excitement of working with an animal for, you know, in some cases, you know, 10 plus years. You know, I mean, the animals I mentioned earlier that are all holdbacks now, with, you know, 5 different recessive genes. I started working with those adults, or well, excuse me, I started working with those lines when they were hatchlings in 2016. So, you know, not all that long. But you know, this is third generation in, combining
Yeah.
things, and I still won't see the result for another 3 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think just that like end goal of creating something super unique. And for me, I want people to know more about Cal Kings, I think, and just appreciate, you know, like you've pointed out, and hopefully I've kind of helped show a little bit that no, they're not corn snakes or hognose, you know, where you've got just incredible combinations of genes, but at the same time, there's a lot more variation, and there are a lot of simple recessive traits,
Yeah.
that gives a lot of potential for, you know, for really unique visual animals that are they're multi-gene animals.
Definitely. Hell yeah, man. I hope to see, you know, more of it too, more love for the Cow King. So yeah. Um Now what do you think the future for you looks like in reptiles? Let's say the next like 3 to 5 years or so. Like what do you foresee? And if at all, are there any species you want to keep down the line in the future?
So, I mean, for me, I think it's species to keep in the future. Really, the only thing that, well, there are two things, two species I really want to keep. Neither of them are colubrids. Um, one is I'm definitely going to have Aldabra tortoises whenever I can get some
Okay.
land. I'm definitely going to have Aldabras. That's hands down my favorite animal, I think, ever.
Nice.
um, so I definitely want those. And then the other would be just like a really nice, you know, like clean locality red tail boa. I
Okay.
think I probably want to get a couple of those, you know, sometime in the future. Um,
Nice.
but so
Like the
far as what I've
Guyanas
seen
or
right,
Surinams or something?
so I really prefer Surinams.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite. I think the Peruvians are probably my second favorite.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean they're just I mean really any like natural looking true locality red tail boa to me
Yeah.
is so much better than any of the morphs out there. A clean representation of what they look like in the wild is so awesome.
Yeah. I think the true BCCs are just super super cool, and yeah, like the Suriname locality is just amazing. I back when I was again reference the pet store, but my old boss, he was getting into some localities, and I know he was very selective, always looking at ads every day, looking at Guyanas and Surinams. And I think he got himself at least a pair of each.
Cool.
But yeah, some super nice animals for sure.
Yeah, they are. That's definite bucket list for sure. But
Nice.
but yeah, man, I mean, I don't think I'm going to change anything so far as what I'm doing in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm still going to just be working on kind of combining a bunch of recessive traits and just seeing what I can get with multivisuals, and just hopefully getting somebody excited about some Cal Kings.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. And now last question here. So what would you say to someone looking to get into colubrids or into cow kings in general? What's kind of your elevator pitch as to why colubrids, why cow kings?
I think colubrids in general, I think, are just a very versatile group of snakes. I mean, the whole family of snakes, they're pretty easy to keep. They're not, um, for the most part, they're not like high maintenance snakes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge selling point. And you don't. I mean, I guess certainly not all of them, but a lot of them, cow kings, I guess in particular, they're not snakes that get 8, 9, 10 feet long, like some of the
Yeah.
others. So cow kings, if you find a 5 foot cow king, that's a beast.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are a lot of lines. I mean, I've got some that, as full grown adults, I don't even think they're too much more than 40 inches.
Okay.
So I've got some that stay much smaller, and then I've got other lines that, are definitely over 4 feet. Um, so it's a nice, kind of smaller size species, I think.
Right.
And just, yeah, easy to keep, man. And they're just fun,
Yeah.
they're fun, but they're not finicky eaters. They're not, they're not gonna, at the same time, they're not usually gonna bite you either. They're not aggressive snakes, so you can still pick them up and walk around with them if you want. You can still,
Yep.
interact with them normally. So I don't know. I mean, I think for me, it's just, they're just active enough, that they're still interesting, whereas some just kind of sit there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Now I gotcha. All right, cool, man. Well, this has been a fantastic just over hour and 40 minutes. There's 20 likes on the pod, which I really appreciate, everyone, which means there's at least 20 people watching. So what do you have to say to everyone who did watch tonight and will watch or listen later?
well, I appreciate, you guys having genuine interest in colubrids, and thanks for listening to me babble about Cal Kings. And Joe, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much for coming on. It was great to meet both you and John at Daytona. It was a really fun weekend overall. You guys had a
Likewise.
great setup. Um, Anyone who was there and missed their table, you missed out for sure. But definitely, and for anyone looking to find them on social media, you could look up at Palm Beach Colubrids on Instagram. The link is in the description as well, so you can go hit that link, go follow them, say what's up to them. But yeah, that's pretty much it, man. I'm gonna throw you backstage, run through the outro, and we could talk real quick after. All right.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, man.
Yep.
All right, guys. What another great episode of the Colubrid Corruption podcast. I hope you all enjoyed this one. If you're just tuning in now, or you've been listening the whole time, make sure you leave that like. Make sure you hit subscribe on the channel. Again, I really appreciate it. Drop a comment. Also, if you're listening on the podcast platforms, remember to rate, review, subscribe, share it out on social media, all that stuff. Let's push this out to more colubrid people, more people who don't have colubrids. That's the point of the show, is to corrupt them, to buy some colubrids. That's what it's all about. And yeah, guys, if you're also looking for exclusive content, a little more behind the scenes from me, and you just want to say thanks and support the show, you could click the first link in the description that goes to the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. Cool Discord community, a bunch of people that are super into reptiles, just a really cool group of people, and I appreciate them for supporting me. So thank you, guys. Thank you to everyone in the live chats tonight for coming out. A lot of people today. I haven't seen that many people in a long time, so I really appreciate it. Hope we can kind of keep that momentum up as we keep going. But yeah, guys, otherwise, this has been another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. This was episode number 36 with Mike Gillen of Palm Beach Colubrids. Thank you all for tuning in. Enjoy your night. Have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.